The structural support beam groaned under the immense weight as Zara carefully guided it into position. At 8 feet tall with shoulders that could span a doorway, she made the massive steel girder look manageable in her powerful hands. The bioluminescent markings along her arms pulsed a soft blue-white as she concentrated, the traditional patterns of her people flowing like liquid starlight beneath her bronze skin. "Stand clear," she called out in her resonant voice, though she knew none of the other workers would dare come close enough to be in danger. They never did. The beam slotted perfectly into place with a satisfying metallic ring that echoed through the construction bay of mining station Kepler 442. Zara stepped back, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow, and surveyed her work with quiet satisfaction. Another section of the station's expansion was complete, built to withstand the gravitational stresses of the asteroid field they orbited. As she turned to retrieve her tools, she caught sight of the other construction workers huddled near the far wall, their voices carrying just enough for her to make out the familiar whispers. "Look at the size of her, those markings are creepy as hell. Titaness warriors, man. One wrong move and she could snap us like twigs. Why'd they even assign her to civilian work? She belongs on a battleship." Zara's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. The Titaness had been warriors for millennia, their imposing stature and strength making them legendary across the galaxy. But Zara had never wanted to fight. She'd studied engineering, gravitational physics, structural design, anything to escape the expectations of her bloodline. Yet even here, millions of light years from her homeworld, she couldn't escape what others saw when they looked at her. She gathered her plasma torch and calibration tools, her movements precise despite the heavy equipment. The other workers scattered as she approached their general area, finding sudden urgent tasks elsewhere. Zara sighed, her breath misting slightly in the recycled air. Another day, another reminder that she was alone among the stars. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was warm, friendly, and startlingly close. Zara turned, surprised to find a human male standing just a few feet away. He was of average height for his species, which put him well below her shoulder, with sandy brown hair and green eyes that sparkled with genuine curiosity. His maintenance coveralls were stained with grease and coolant, and he held a diagnostic tablet in one hand. "I'm Jake," he said, extending his free hand with an easy smile. "Jake Morrison. I'm with the Environmental Systems crew." Zara stared at the offered hand for a moment, uncertain. Most beings were afraid to touch her, her strength was legendary, and her appearance intimidating. But Jake's expression held no fear, only patient friendliness. "Zara," she replied cautiously, gently taking his hand in her much larger one. His grip was firm, unfazed by the size difference or the soft glow emanating from the patterns on her skin. "I've been watching you work," Jake continued, seemingly oblivious to the shocked stares from the other workers. "That beam placement was incredible. The precision, the way you calculated the stress points, I've never seen anything like it." "You were watching me?" Zara's voice came out more defensive than she intended. Jake's smile widened. "Professional admiration. I maintain the atmospheric processors, and I know good engineering when I see it. The way you reinforced that junction point. Brilliant. It'll distribute the load more evenly than the original specs called for." Something warm flickered in Zara's chest, surprise, perhaps, or the unfamiliar sensation of being truly seen for her work rather than her appearance. "You understand structural engineering?" "Basic principles," Jake shrugged. "Had to learn when I started working on stations. Can't maintain life support systems without understanding how they integrate with the overall structure." He paused, studying the beam she'd just installed. "Mind if I ask how you calculated the stress modifications?" The math must have been complex. For the first time in months, Zara found herself genuinely smiling. "It's about understanding harmonic resonance in crystalline metals. The original design assumed standard load distribution, but in an asteroid field." She trailed off, realizing she was about to launch into a technical explanation that would probably bore him to tears. Most beings glazed over when she started talking about engineering principles. But Jake was nodding eagerly. The gravitational fluctuations would create irregular stress patterns. So you compensated by adjusting the mounting points? Exactly. Zara's smile grew wider, her bioluminescent markings pulsing brighter with excitement. The key is predicting the resonance frequency and... Sorry to interrupt, Jake said, though he didn't look sorry at all, but I'm about to go off shift. Any chance you'd like to continue this conversation over dinner? The station's mess hall serves a decent synthetic steak, and I'd love to hear more about your work. Zara's markings dimmed as uncertainty crept in. You want to have dinner? With me? Well, yeah. Jake's expression was genuinely puzzled by her surprise. You're clearly brilliant, and I don't often meet someone who can make structural engineering sound fascinating. Plus, he added with a grin, you seem like interesting company. Around them, the construction bay had gone quiet. Every worker in the area was staring, their expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. A human was asking the giant Titaness to dinner, and she was actually considering it. Zara hesitated, her ingrained caution warring with a sudden, desperate hope. I should warn you, people tend to find my presence overwhelming. Jake glanced around at their audience, then back at her with a mischievous smile. Good thing I'm not people, then. I'm Jake Morrison, environmental systems technician, and I happen to think you're pretty amazing. The sincerity in his voice made Zara's chest tighten with emotion. When was the last time someone had called her amazing for reasons that had nothing to do with her capacity for destruction? Dinner sounds nice, she said softly. Great. Jake's enthusiasm was infectious. Meet you at Mess Hall 7 in about an hour. That'll give us both time to clean up. Zara nodded, still hardly believing this was happening. As Jake walked away with a cheerful wave, she became aware of the hushed conversation starting up around her. Is he insane? That human has a death wish. She could crush him like an insect. But for once, the whispers didn't sting. Instead, Zara found herself looking forward to dinner with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Someone had looked at her and seen an engineer, a person worth talking to, worth spending time with. The novelty was both thrilling and terrifying. As she made her way to her quarters to change, Zara caught her reflection in a polished metal surface. Her bioluminescent markings were glowing brighter than they had in months, the traditional patterns of her people flowing like rivers of starlight across her skin. For the first time, she wondered if Jake might find them beautiful rather than frightening. An hour later, Zara stood outside the mess hall, smoothing down her civilian clothes, a simple tunic and pants that were the closest thing she owned to formal wear. Her markings had settled into a soft, steady glow, and she'd actually taken time with her appearance, braiding her long dark hair with small metallic ornaments that caught the light. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see Jake already seated at a corner table, 2 meal trays waiting. He'd changed into clean clothes and was reading something on his tablet, occasionally glancing toward the entrance. Zara took a deep breath and stepped inside. Conversations quieted as she entered, heads turning to track her movement across the room. But instead of shrinking under the attention as she usually did, she found herself walking taller. Jake looked up as she approached, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. Zara. You look wonderful. He stood and pulled out a chair for her, a gesture that required him to reach up given her height, but he managed it with such natural grace that it didn't feel awkward. Thank you, she said, settling into the reinforced chair. The mess hall furniture was designed to accommodate various species, but she still dwarfed most of it. I got you the protein synthesis special, Jake said, sitting across from her. Figured someone with your muscle mass would need the extra nutrition. Hope that's okay. It's perfect. Zara was touched by his thoughtfulness. Most beings either assumed she ate raw meat like some savage or avoided the topic of her dietary needs entirely. As they ate, their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Jake asked intelligent questions about her engineering work, shared stories from his own experiences maintaining the station's complex systems, and managed to make her laugh with his observations about the quirks of various alien technologies. "So," Jake said, leaning forward with interest, "what made you choose structural engineering? I mean, with your people's reputation as warriors." Zara's markings dimmed slightly. "You know about that. Common knowledge," Jake admitted. "But I also know that individuals aren't defined by their species' history. So what drew you to building things instead of, well, the other thing?" The question was asked without judgment, genuine curiosity coloring his voice. Zara found herself opening up in a way she hadn't in years. "I've always been fascinated by how things fit together," she said slowly. "How individual components can combine to create something stronger than the sum of their parts. As a child, I would spend hours studying the crystal formations on my homeworld, learning how they grew and supported each other." "And your family was okay with that?" Zara's laugh held a trace of old pain. "My family expected me to join the warrior caste like every other Titaness for the past 1,000 years. When I chose the Academy of Sciences instead." She shrugged. "Let's just say I've been something of a disappointment." Jake's expression grew serious. "Their loss. The station is safer because of your work, and the expansion project is ahead of schedule. That's worth celebrating, not dismissing." The warmth in his voice made Zara's markings pulse brighter. "You really mean that?" "Of course I do." Jake reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The gesture was bold, intimate, and completely unafraid. "You're remarkable, Zara. I hope you know that." Looking into his earnest green eyes, surrounded by the soft glow of her own bioluminescence reflecting off his skin, Zara felt something she'd thought lost forever: hope. Perhaps she wasn't destined to spend her life alone among the stars after all. The thermal gardens of Mars colony stretched beneath the massive environmental dome, a paradise of impossible beauty where crystalline trees grew alongside flowering vines that thrived in temperatures that would kill most living things. Steam rose from natural hot springs, and the air shimmered with heat waves that created an otherworldly atmosphere. At the center of it all moved Ember, her form like living flame made manifest. Her skin held the deep orange-red glow of molten metal, with veins of brighter fire running along her arms and shoulders like rivers of liquid sunlight. The Pirathi were beings of pure thermal energy, their bodies maintaining temperatures that could melt steel. Ember's long hair flowed like liquid copper, never quite still, always moving as if caught in an eternal solar wind. Her eyes burned with the intensity of twin stars, beautiful and terrible in their radiance. She tended to the heat-loving plants with practiced care, her touch coaxing exotic blooms to unfurl their petals. The thermal moss responded to her presence, glowing brighter as she passed. Here, in this sanctuary of warmth and life, she could almost forget that she was completely alone. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze. No one ever came to the thermal gardens during the day shift, the heat was too intense for most species. She turned slowly, expecting to see a maintenance drone or perhaps a foolish tourist who had wandered too far from the cooler sections of the dome. Instead, she found herself face to face with a human male carrying what appeared to be scientific equipment. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly in the humid air and warm brown eyes that studied her with fascinating rather than fear. His clothes were practical, lightweight fabrics designed for hot climates, and he wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast interesting shadows across his angular features. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Lucas Chen, botanical researcher from Earth University. I was told I might find the thermal gardens caretaker here." Ember stared at him, speechless. He was looking directly at her, seemingly unbothered by her appearance or the waves of heat radiating from her body. Most beings couldn't get within 10 feet of her without protective gear. "You're not wearing thermal protection," she managed, her voice carrying the soft crackling quality of her people, like a gentle fire burning in a hearth. Lucas glanced down at his simple field clothes and smiled. I spent 3 years studying volcanic ecosystems on Io. You develop a tolerance for heat after a while. He paused, studying her with genuine scientific interest. You're Parathi, aren't you? I've read about your people, but I've never had the privilege of meeting one of you in person. Privilege? The word came out sharper than Ember intended. Most consider it a curse to encounter my kind. Then most people are idiots, Lucas replied matter-of-factly, setting down his equipment case. The Parathi are living examples of biothermal engineering at its finest. Your people have evolved to not just survive in extreme heat, but to create and nurture life in conditions that would be impossible for other species. His eyes lit up with enthusiasm. The applications for terraforming alone are incredible. Ember felt something stir in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with her natural body temperature. When was the last time someone had spoken about her people with admiration rather than fear? You study extreme environment botany, she asked, moving closer despite herself. She noticed that Lucas didn't step back as she approached, even though the air temperature around her was rising. Among other things, he nodded. I'm here to study the thermal-resistant plant varieties you've cultivated. The reports I've read suggest you've managed to create hybrid species that shouldn't be able to exist. He gestured toward a nearby cluster of crystalline flowers that seemed to be made of living glass. Those, for example. They appear to be a fusion of silicon-based and carbon-based life forms. The fire orchids, Ember said softly, a note of pride creeping into her voice. They took me 3 years to develop. The trick was finding the right balance between thermal conductivity and organic growth patterns. Extraordinary, Lucas breathed, pulling a handheld scanner from his case. May I? I promise not to damage them. For the first time in months, Ember found herself smiling. Of course. But be careful, they're sensitive to sudden temperature changes. As Lucas began his examination, Ember found herself studying him with equal fascination. He moved with the careful precision of someone accustomed to working with delicate specimens, his hands steady despite the extreme heat. Beads of sweat had formed on his forehead, but he seemed genuinely unbothered by the harsh conditions. The cellular structure is incredible, he murmured, recording data on his scanner. How did you manage to stabilize the silicon matrix without disrupting the organic components? Gradual thermal cycling, Ember explained, moving to stand beside him. The key is introducing the elements slowly, allowing each component to adapt to temperature fluctuations before adding complexity. Brilliant, Lucas looked up at her, his eyes bright with admiration. You're not just a gardener, are you? You're a genetic engineer. Ember's flames flickered brighter, betraying her pleasure at his recognition. I studied biothermal sciences before coming to Mars. But opportunities for my kind are limited. Limited? Lucas looked genuinely confused. Why? You have capabilities that most scientists could only dream of. You can work directly with specimens at temperatures that would require massive energy expenditure to maintain artificially. Because most beings are afraid of me, Ember said quietly. They see a fire creature and assume I'm destructive. They don't understand that my people are gardeners, cultivators of life, not destroyers. Lucas was quiet for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. Their fear is their loss, he said finally. And if you're willing, I'd like to change that. What do you mean? I'm documenting thermal-resistant ecosystems for a galactic database. The goal is to identify potential terraforming candidates for worlds that are currently too hot to support conventional life. He gestured toward the gardens around them. This place, what you've created here, could be the key to making dozens of worlds habitable. Ember's heart raced. You want to share my work? With your permission, yes. But more than that, I'd like to collaborate. I have access to research facilities, funding, and specimen collections from across the galaxy. Together, we could create something unprecedented. The offer was everything Ember had dreamed of but never dared hope for. Scientific recognition, the chance to contribute to something meaningful, a partner who understood her work. "You'd want to work with me?" she asked, hardly believing it. "Despite what I am?" Lucas stepped closer, close enough that the heat from her body should have been uncomfortable for him. "Because of what you are," he corrected gently. "Ember, you're not just a gardener or even a scientist. You're an artist. This entire place is a masterpiece of biological engineering." As if responding to her emotions, the plants around them began to glow more brightly. The fire orchids pulsed with inner light, the thermal moss spread its luminescent fronds, and the crystalline trees chimed softly in the heated air. The entire garden was responding to her presence, to the joy she was feeling for the first time in years. "I've never seen anything like this," Lucas whispered, turning in a slow circle to take in the display. "You're connected to them, aren't you? They respond to your emotions." "It's part of being Parathi," Ember explained, her voice soft with wonder. "We don't just create heat, we create life. But I've never had anyone here to share it with before." "Then I'm honored to be the first," Lucas said, his voice warm with sincerity. They spent the next several hours touring the gardens together, with Ember explaining her techniques while Lucas documented everything with obvious fascination. He asked intelligent questions, offered insightful observations, and never once seemed uncomfortable with the extreme conditions. More importantly, he looked at her as if she were beautiful rather than dangerous. As the artificial sun began to set within the dome, casting long shadows through the steamy air, Lucas finally began packing up his equipment. "I should let you get back to your work," he said reluctantly. "But would it be possible to continue this tomorrow? I have so many more questions." "You want to come back?" Ember asked, surprised by how much the thought pleased her. "If you'll have me," Lucas smiled. "I'm supposed to be here for 2 weeks, but honestly, I could spend months studying what you've accomplished here." "I'd like that," Ember admitted. "It's been lonely, working alone all this time." Lucas paused in his packing, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ember, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, curious. "Are you always alone here? I mean, doesn't anyone else work in the thermal sections?" "The other gardeners handle the temperate zones," Ember explained. "I'm the only one who can survive in the high heat areas for extended periods. Most of the staff avoid this section entirely." "That's a shame," Lucas said quietly. "They're missing out on something extraordinary." He hesitated, then added, "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? I know a place in the colony that serves excellent food, and I'd love to hear more about your research." Ember's flames flickered with uncertainty. "I don't know if that's a good idea. Public spaces, other people. There's a private dining room at the research facility," Lucas offered. "Climate controlled, no crowds. Just us and good food." The offer was tempting, more tempting than it should have been. Ember found herself nodding before she could second-guess the decision. "I'd like that," she said softly. Lucas's smile was radiant. "Wonderful. Shall we say 7 o'clock?" As he walked away, turning back once to wave, Ember stood among her glowing gardens and felt something she hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For the first time since coming to Mars, she wasn't dreading the evening ahead. Instead, she was looking forward to spending more time with the remarkable human who saw beauty where others saw only danger. The fire orchids pulsed brighter around her, as if celebrating her happiness, and Ember allowed herself to smile. Perhaps she wouldn't have to spend the rest of her life alone among the flames after all. The corridors of Harmony Station were eerily quiet during the night shift, a stark contrast to the bustling cacophony of commerce that filled them during standard hours. In the deepest maintenance level, where the hum of life support systems provided the only company, Melody moved through her duties with practiced silence. Her crystalline features caught the dim emergency lighting, casting prismatic rainbows across the metal walls. The Resonari were beings of living sound and light, their bodies formed from organic crystal that resonated with every vibration around them. Melody's skin held the translucent quality of fine quartz, with veins of deeper color running through it like frozen music. Her hair moved in waves of crystalline strands that chimed softly when she walked, creating an unconscious melody that followed her everywhere. But it was her voice that made her dangerous. She hummed quietly as she worked, a low, haunting melody that seemed to emerge from the very walls around her. The tune was beautiful, heartbreaking in its loneliness, but she kept it barely above a whisper. She had learned through painful experience that her voice, uncontrolled, could shatter glass, rupture eardrums, or worse. The last time she had sung at full volume, 3 viewports had exploded and 17 beings had been hospitalized. That was why she worked alone, in the depths of the station where no one would hear her, where no one could be hurt by what she was. The soft sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor made her freeze. Her humming died instantly, replaced by the oppressive silence she had wrapped around herself like armor. No one came to the maintenance levels during night shift. It was one of the few places she could exist without fear of causing harm. A human male rounded the corner, carrying what appeared to be a musical instrument case. He was shorter than average for his species, with gentle features and kind eyes that reminded her of Earth's oceans. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and he wore the casual clothes of a civilian rather than station personnel. "Oh," he said, stopping when he saw her. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was down here." Melody pressed herself against the wall, her crystalline form blending partially with the metal surfaces. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This area is restricted during night shifts." "I know," the human said, setting down his case. "I'm David Song, yes, that's really my last name. I'm a traveling musician, and I was looking for somewhere quiet to practice without disturbing anyone." He paused, studying her with curious rather than fearful eyes. "You're Resonari, aren't you?" Melody nodded reluctantly. "You should leave. It's not safe." "Why?" David asked, genuinely puzzled. "You seem harmless enough." "I'm not," Melody said firmly. "My voice can kill. My people are living weapons, beings of destructive sound. The station administration assigned me to night maintenance specifically to keep me away from populated areas." David's expression grew thoughtful. "That's interesting. I've studied Resonari culture in my musical research. Your people aren't weapons, you're artists. The greatest composers and singers in galactic history." "That was before," Melody whispered. "Before we learned what our voices could do to other species. What they could do, or what they can do?" David asked, opening his case to reveal a beautifully crafted acoustic guitar. "There's a difference between potential for harm and intent to harm." Melody stared at the instrument, her crystalline features reflecting its polished wood surface. "I haven't heard live music in years," she admitted softly. "Then you're overdue," David said with a smile. He settled cross-legged on the floor, cradling the guitar. "Mind if I play something?" "I promise to keep it quiet." Before Melody could protest, his fingers began moving across the strings. The melody that emerged was soft and sweet, a gentle ballad that seemed to fill the corridor with warmth. It was beautiful, but more than that, it was safe. Human music, created by human hands for human ears, incapable of the devastating power that her voice could unleash. Despite herself, Melody found herself moving closer, drawn by the unfamiliar sensation of enjoying music without fear. She had forgotten what it felt like to listen without calculating potential damage, to simply appreciate the beauty of organized sound. "That's lovely," she said when the song ended. "What is it?" "An old Earth ballad called Scarborough Fair," David replied. "My grandmother taught it to me when I was young." He looked up at her with encouraging eyes. "I heard you humming when I came down here. It was beautiful. Would you sing it for me?" Melody recoiled as if he had struck her. "No. I can't, I won't risk hurting you." "What if I told you I don't think you would?" David asked gently. "What if I told you that I've been researching harmonic resonance and sound frequencies for years, and I believe the Resonari gift isn't about destruction at all?" "You don't understand," Melody said desperately. "The last time I sang freely, people were hurt. Windows shattered, beings were hospitalized. I'm dangerous. David set aside his guitar and stood, moving closer despite her obvious distress. Melody, that is your name, isn't it? What if those incidents weren't about your voice being destructive, but about it being powerful? What if the damage happened because you were trying to suppress your natural abilities instead of channeling them properly? The question hung in the air between them, radical in its implications. Melody had spent years believing that her voice was a curse, that her people's gift was something to be hidden and controlled. The idea that it might be something else entirely was both terrifying and hopeful. I've studied the physics of sound, David continued. Resonance can be destructive if it's uncontrolled, but it can also be healing, beautiful, transformative. The same frequency that can shatter glass can also create the most beautiful music ever heard. But what if you're wrong? Melody whispered. What if I hurt you? Then I'll take that risk, David said simply. Because I believe in the power of music to heal rather than harm. And I believe that you're not a weapon, you're an artist who's been forced to silence herself. The words hit Melody like a physical blow. For so long, she had defined herself by her capacity for destruction, had allowed fear to cage the very essence of what she was. But here was this human, this stranger, who saw something different in her. I don't know how to sing safely, she admitted. Then let's figure it out together, David suggested. Start small. Just a few notes, nothing more. I'll tell you if it's too much. Melody hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to remain silent. But something in David's eyes, trust, hope, genuine desire to hear her voice, gave her courage. She opened her mouth and let out a single, pure note. The sound that emerged was unlike anything she had ever produced in her attempts at restraint. It was crystalline, perfect, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in the very air around them. The metal walls of the corridor caught the note and reflected it back in a chorus of complementary frequencies, creating a symphony of sound that was both powerful and beautiful. David's eyes widened, but not with fear, with wonder. That was incredible, he breathed. Try another one. Emboldened, Melody sang a second note, then a third, building a simple melody that seemed to transform the sterile corridor into a concert hall. The station's infrastructure became her instrument, resonating with her voice to create something magnificent. You're not destroying anything, David said, his voice filled with awe. You're making the station itself sing. As if to prove his point, the lights around them began to pulse gently in rhythm with her voice, the station's systems responding to the harmonics she was creating. It wasn't damage, it was harmony. For the first time in years, Melody allowed herself to truly sing. The melody that poured from her throat was everything she had kept locked inside, loneliness, hope, fear, and desperate longing for connection. It was her heart laid bare in sound, and David listened to every note with tears in his eyes. When the last note faded, they stood in silence, the air still vibrating with the memory of her song. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, David said softly. How could anyone think that was destructive? Because they were afraid, Melody realized. They heard power and assumed it meant danger. Power isn't dangerous, David said, picking up his guitar again. It's what you do with it that matters. He began to play a gentle accompaniment. Would you like to try singing with instrumental backing? I think our voices might harmonize beautifully. As David's guitar joined with her crystalline voice, filling the corridor with music that seemed to make the very walls of the station sing in response, Melody felt something she had thought lost forever, joy. Not just in music, but in sharing it with someone who understood its true nature. They made music together until the first shift change signals echoed through the station, and when they finally parted, it was with plans to meet again the next night. For the first time since arriving at Harmony Station, Melody looked forward to the darkness, knowing it would bring her back to the human who had helped her remember that her voice was a gift, not a curse. In the days that followed, their nightly music sessions became the highlight of Melody's existence. David brought new songs, taught her about human musical traditions, and encouraged her to explore the full range of her abilities. In return, she shared the ancient melodies of her people, songs that had been silenced by fear but never truly forgotten. But more than music grew between them. In the quiet moments between songs, they talked about their lives, their dreams, their fears. David spoke of his travels across the galaxy, collecting songs and stories from every species he encountered. Melody shared her longing to perform again, to use her voice for its intended purpose rather than hiding it away. "I've been thinking," David said one night as they finished a particularly beautiful duet. "There's a music festival on Centauri Prime next month. Artists from across the galaxy perform there. What if we went together?" Melody's song faltered. "I couldn't. What if I hurt someone? What if you don't?" David countered. "What if you show the galaxy what Resonari music really is? What if you help other Resonari realize they don't have to live in silence?" The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. To perform in public again, to share her gift with others, it was everything she had dreamed of and everything she feared. "Would you really go with me?" she asked. "I can't think of anything I'd rather do," David said, his voice warm with affection. Besides, every great artist needs a good accompanist. As they began to plan their first public performance together, Melody realized that David had given her something more precious than music. He had given her back her voice, and with it, the courage to be herself again. In the depths of Harmony Station, among the hum of machinery and the whisper of recycled air, two hearts had found harmony at last.